Welcome back to the channel, and in this video I'm going to be breaking down House of the Dragons and specifically how Rhaenyra is slowly losing the war. So in House of the Dragon Season 3, we follow Rhaenyra's character as she takes King's Landing and starts to rule from the Iron Throne. However, even though she's on the Iron Throne, she's still not won the war against the Greens. And it's safe to say within the war itself, Blacks or Greens aren't winning, and it feels like they're taking heavy losses on both sides. While Season 3 had a couple of battles that the Blacks won, winning the battles didn't necessarily mean a step closer to winning the war. And looking at Rhaenyra and where she is, winning these battles isn't getting her closer to winning the war. I think ultimately, whatever Rhaenyra does, she's probably going to end up losing the war, and here are a few reasons why I think she's heading down this road. Firstly, across all of Season 3 and some of Season 2 as well, you can see the mental state of Rhaenyra start to decline. She's definitely not mentally fit for war and not to rule either. After the death of her two children, she's consumed by grief and very paranoid. This is blocking her from allowing her to be a good queen. She's also full of delusion about herself and her strengths as well, and it's clear that even everyone around her can see she's not mentally fit for the position. There's even a line between Alan and Adam in the finale of Season 3 that said that the Queen's going down a dark path. This is just one example of how others can see what she's like. To me, this bad mental state all started after the death of her first son, Lucerys, at the end of Season 1. You see her struggling throughout Season 2 and obviously consumed by getting revenge, but I think the main turning point for her was at the start of Season 3 where she lost her other son, Jace. Not only has she lost her two sons, but she's lost a bunch of allies and friends along the way as well. I think to her, when she was first in this war, she didn't envision losing her son, so this definitely hit hard, and from her perspective, she's had no time to grieve or rest. As soon as Jace died in Episode 1, in Episode 2, she went straight to King's Landing to take the Iron Throne, and this didn't help. She just added more pressure to her plate. So while she's ruling from King's Landing, she's very mentally unstable, and you can see this just from the end of the finale in Season 3, where she finds out that Aegon's still alive. She panics, cries, and instantly rushes to Daemon, and looks like she's almost having some sort of breakdown. She's obviously not in a position to rule at the moment, and due to the lack of allies around her that want the best for her, she's having to take a lot of the pressure to herself. I also think a big part of this was her actually taking the throne. Taking the throne to her was seen as a big turning point, but it wasn't necessarily a good thing for her. While it might have felt like a victory for her, it created even more problems. While she's at Dragonstone, at least she was away from the throne and didn't have to rule the kingdoms. However, as soon as she got the throne, she had to start ruling, and it picked up a bunch of problems that were left over by the Greens. Firstly, she had to convince King's Landing and all the people that she was their queen, and a lot of people rejected the idea, such as common folk and even the Sept as well. She also had enemies inside the cities that didn't like her, for example the assassins that ended up killing the Gold Cloaks. And this was a big problem because she probably didn't feel as safe in King's Landing as she did on Dragonstone. Also, she couldn't really get a grasp of her enemies. Ormond, Aegon and Aemond were still out there, and she only knew where Ormond was. She also had run out of money, so this left her with a bunch of problems as well, such as she had to raise taxes, she demands money from the small folk, and she even executed certain people. So now there's a lot of people in the city that don't even like her. One of the only forces she had in King's Landing were the Gold Cloaks, but these ended up getting assassinated, so she's pretty much alone there. She has a small council, but it's full of people like Mysaria, who are playing both sides anyway and not truly loyal to her cause. So there's very little people in King's Landing by her side, and she's also got the pressure of ruling as well as trying to win the war. One thing that she can't run away from as well is the fact that because she's a woman on the Iron Throne, a lot of people just won't accept this, and this is what initially started the war in the first place. When Viserys named her heir, a lot of people weren't happy about this, and these are the people that ended up siding with Aegon. Even if there wasn't a war, there's always going to be people that are not going to accept a woman on the Iron Throne, and this will ultimately lead to rebellions. So even if she ended up winning the war, ultimately there's going to be so much friction in the future that it's going to be difficult for her. And we see this with Ormond Hightower as an example. One of the reasons he wants to take down Rhaenyra is for his own cause to gain power through Daemon. It's not necessarily because he's supporting the Greens. He doesn't support Aegon and Aemond or any of their causes. He just doesn't see Rhaenyra as a suitable option for the Iron Throne. This is a view that a lot of people across Westeros believe in as well. Another reason why Rhaenyra's slowly losing the war is that she's really bad at keeping her allies. She's not good at making allies or maintaining relationships with them, and we see this for a few key characters throughout the show. The first big one is Corlys as a perfect example. Corlys is probably the strongest ally she's got, and Rhaenyra's decision to not legitimise his kids doesn't sit well with him, and he actually ends up leaving King's Landing because of this. This also alienates his men and his sons Adam and Alan as well, who are also important allies to her. There's various other small examples throughout the show, such as House Frey, where she promised to give him access to Harrenhal, which they didn't, and also Lady Jane Arryn of the Eyrie, where she promised to give her a dragon to protect the Vale if they sided with the Blacks, but she ended up sending her a dragon the same size of the cat. There's also the Dragon Seeds, Hugh and Orth, and obviously Orth specifically hasn't acted the best as a Dragon Seed, but Rhaenyra was kind of incapable of keeping him on the side of the Blacks and just meeting him halfway and giving him what he wants. Instead, they ended up betraying Rhaenyra, and this massively backfires. You've also got other characters like Baelor, who rides Moondancer, and she's not really treating her the best. And this is a key factor because obviously that's one of the dragons on the black side. Not just that, but the allies that do stick with her, like Jace and Rhaenys, have ended up dying, and this is probably not Rhaenyra's fault entirely, but it does show how they're divided in their goals. Another key factor as well, which I think is overlooked, but Rhaenyra is generally a really bad ruler. From what we've seen of her on the Iron Throne, she hasn't made very good decisions. She seems to just keep making poor decision after poor decision. As well as being a bad ruler, she's also not got an effective strategy for the war. If you compare her to someone like Daemon and Ormond, who are obviously built better for the war and are good strategists, even though their ways are a bit more brutal, they do get the job done better than Rhaenyra. She's got 6 dragons, so in theory she could have just put the 6 dragons over Tumbleton and burnt Tumbleton, and even though this would have caused upset within some of the small folk, it would have eliminated the enemy and her army would have still been intact. It's not necessarily the decisions she makes that are always bad, but it's also her lack of decisions. She lets people like Aegon, Aemond and Ormond stay out in Westeros and come up with strategies and plans to try and take her down. Her main priority has been trying to get revenge for her sons, rather than actually trying to win the war. Even though in theory she's got 6 dragons in comparison to the Green's 3 dragons, she doesn't really use them effectively, and when they do get into battles they end up dying because only 1 dragon's there, like Rhaenys and Jace. Every decision she makes doesn't really land, and it either annoys allies or annoys the people of King's Landing, and in reality you've got to annoy one, but I think with her trying to maintain peace as long as possible, it's ending up just ripping everything apart anyway. One of the things she had to face is there was always going to be casualties, and that's not something that she's come to terms with just yet. Based on just these factors alone, you can see that she's clearly not a suitable ruler, and despite winning battles, she's slowly overall losing the war.